actually getting the pulse of what's happening at a global scale. So it's really, really cool to get all this information of what's happening in China, what's happening in Japan, what's happening in UK, what's happening in US. And not a lot of people have actually that capacity. So it's really nice. Sometimes also a little bit scary, to be honest, because you get to see what's happening elsewhere and you go like, okay, let's hope it doesn't happen here. And then it happens, of course, this being Spain. So we're getting everything.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know, guys, how do you normally do this? So
yeah. Okay. So your talk will be on how to plan a startup strategy in times of crisis. So this is the title that you've picked. So as I mentioned, Alex, we usually give our guest speaker 20 minutes, half an hour to talk, to present, and then we open it to Q&A from the public.
Okay.
So I see everybody is muted, so we don't have any background noises. I'm going to unmute us too. And when you're ready for Q&A, let us know.
Take it away, Alex. And again, thank you very much for joining us. And welcome, everybody. Welcome, Tasso. Welcome, Vicky. Welcome, Maria. Thanos, good to see you again. Hello, Alexander, Nikos, Istem, and Elena, and a few other people. This is also going out live on Facebook. So hello to everybody on Facebook. And we'll look at the questions. And if you want to join the Zoom call as well, Maria will post the link to the Zoom call and join us. And let's have a cool jam. All right.
Perfect. So
they're all yours, Alex.
Thank you. So I actually don't want to take a lot of time because there's basically a lot to unpack here, and I would rather get more into a conversation with people and get questions and how people are feeling this and how they feel that this is going to affect them personally in their companies. But just to give a little bit of background, so we're all on the same page. This is having, obviously, coronavirus is having massive implications for startups. But honestly, maybe if there's one thing that it should be clear is that COVID-19 is an accelerator of things that were already happening. So what's basically happening worldwide is that all these trends that we were seeing, everyone here in the startup world was seeing, suddenly they've jumped like 10 years. And it's incredible in some spaces how fast this is actually going. It's not just that, is we are entering like in a new era, basically, where we were transitioning into this new innovation era, but now this is here. And when we emerge out of the other side, it's going to be very different. And I think nearly everyone here understands some of the major issues related to this new epoch, if we want to see like that, which is basically agile cycles for product development. A lot of the startups were already producing or developing product in an agile way. Remote work, obviously, digitalization of process, and maybe one that's less intuitive for a lot of people, but it's data-driven decisions. There's still a lot of businesses that are making decisions without data. And what's happening is right now, to make decisions, you do need data. And so all these kind of things are going to be the hallmark of the new epoch. And a lot of the traditional companies are being launched into these things. One of the core aspects of the new epoch or the new era is going to be the automation of everything. And while in a lot of cases, what we were seeing so far was, hey, we're going to do automation because it's efficient. So we do things faster and it's nicer and it's cooler. It's like, oh, wow, we can do that. Now it's essentially becoming a must. If you don't do automation to a powerful degree, your costs of operation are too high and you won't be able to survive this. So it's turning into a critical element for survival for a lot of the companies out there. So some of the impacts of what we're going to see moving forward are going to be new regulation and needs. We were already seeing a clashing of regulations between technology and the regulators, both in at a US level, at a European level, with China. Now this is going to become the norm because a lot of the industries as we know it are going to implode. And so all this digital is going to unleash a lot of issues that were latent or were already being seen, but now suddenly they're going to be forced to regulate this whole thing. Then privacy and ethics. I think we're all already seeing that. Probably in Greece, this is not that developed, but it's already expanding across Europe, the whole contact tracing, the whole tracking, anonymous tracking of mobile phones and stuff like that. And sadly, a lot of people are like, hey, yeah, sure, take my money. So we're going to get to a point, because the thing that happens with privacy is once you give things, it's very hard to get it back, right? Because people get used to it. So we will see what happens with that, and also with the ethics of how, this is what in Latin we always say, quid custodia ipso custodian, and who checks on the ones that are checking, right? There's going to be literally no traveling for a long time. And this is something that a lot of people don't fully grasp yet. They say, yeah, we are going to go on vacation during summer. It's not going to happen. You're not going to leave your country. They're not going to allow you, even if they allow you to leave the country, you're not going to be allowed to go into other countries. And that's going to be long-term, like maybe a year or more. So it's going to be, we're going to see what happens, but anything that requires you to move somewhere else is beyond your national borders is just not going to happen, or it's going to happen under very, very unique circumstances. And this is, if you allow me the wording, this is fucked up in more than one way, because a lot of us do actual business across Europe, and the fact that you cannot physically be there or go to a conference and connect with in a network event, or even visit, like a visit, you go to another country. Just last year, I spent 20 days traveling Asia, 6 countries in 20 days. Now that is something I cannot do anymore. So the thing is, this is really going to upend a lot of the stuff we know on how we do businesses. Even if you're used to remote, I'm very used to doing remote, but still there's a component of traveling that's pretty critical for a lot of businesses. Then the last thing that I think is going to be a big impact is there's going to be a second wave, and there's going to be a third wave, and there's probably going to be a fourth wave, right? And it's already beginning in Asia. China is trying to contain the second wave, but this is going to happen. And so far, all the research that we have is not painting a good picture. It's going to be very hard to do the vaccine. So the most plausible scenario is that we're going to be in lockdowns on and off, on and off, on and off. So the reason why I bring this is not news for anyone, but the reason why I bring this is because we need to plan long-term. If you're a startup, it's important that you understand that this is not going to go back to normal anytime soon, which means that whatever changes in process that you need to do needs to be designed to cope with the on and off lockdown mechanisms that are going to happen all across the regions. So this is just broad picture that I wanted to paint, just so I give a little bit more of information, more regarding, for example, financing of startups, is that so far there's been a considerable impact on the venture capital stage. The number of operations are more or less stable. So we've seen the same amount of operations more or less than other years and other quarters. But what has gone out of the window is the volume of the deals. Like forget any big deals happening in the next future. They're out of the window. Like I was just running the numbers this morning for Spain for the first 20 days of April, and it's insane. Like the difference in volume size is amazing. And even worse is when you look at Europe, more than half of the big rounds, over 50 million happening in Europe, are driven by US and China. So basically that has gone. So there's still going to be investment. There's a lot of money injected in the system. So we're still going to see operations, but the ticket sizes are going to be way smaller. So just so you know, if you're looking for money, make sure you tap into a lot of people, because the average ticket is gonna be small. The one sure death right now is M&A. So if you were planning on exiting your company, please forget about it for a while, because that has literally gone out of the window. And it's getting worse because each year, so Europe has sent like a directive saying, you know, M&A lockdown, no investment outside of Europe. Every acquisition beyond 10% of a company from a foreign entity needs to go through an approval process. So it's not like it's banned, and it's not for every sector, but it's most of the sectors that startups touch. So basically, it's going to be very hard to get investment, an acquisition or an exit, or even large investment from outside, because this also applies to acquiring a certain piece of the company. This was already happening to a certain degree. Europe was already very worried that China was going to get involved and take over certain industries. So they were already planning on doing something like this, but now it's just gone on steroids. Okay, so what that means is that it's going to be very hard to get investors from outside of Europe. It's going to be hard, if not impossible, for certain companies to exit right now. And we'll see what happens. We'll see if the mechanisms that we have allow for a smooth process. But so far, what I've seen, at least in Spain, with the shitty government we have right now, is that there's no one qualified to veto or to evaluate which deals get through or not. So essentially, that renders the whole operation, even if it's not forbidden, it kind of turns it into something with a lot of friction for any investor outside. So we will see what happens in that space. Obviously, I'm just gonna touch on things that I think everyone knows, but just so we get the major picture. Most affected spaces, obviously, travel, mobility, job hunting, real estate. All of those will come back the moment we start lifting the lockdowns. So it's just a temporary issue. Obviously, we all know that if you don't have enough cash and it's hard for you to raise money, a lot of the companies are just going to go out of business. So it's not like the industry is going to go away. It will eventually come back. But if you think about a country like Greece or Spain, where 70-something% of our industry services, that means that 70% of our industry is literally obliterated for a year and a half. And even for those people that say that travel is going to come back, even if you open the borders, people are not going to fly, or tickets are going to be extremely expensive, if any, if they're available tickets, flight tickets. So it's going to be painful for those companies on the medium term. It will come back. Again, don't get me wrong, those will come back, and will rebound pretty fast, but it just takes some time. Least affected: digital health, biotech, telemedicine. Obviously, they're having a great time. Groceries are having a fantastic time. Any kind of collaboration tool, streaming. Same thing applies here. All those sectors are seeing a lot of traffic right now, and most of them will stop seeing that traffic eventually, actually faster than those that are getting hurt. So we will see a leveling of groceries, a level of online groceries, a leveling of collaborative sharing and stuff like that. So just either if you're on one side or on the other side of the spectrum, be careful, because this is just a temporary waves that we're seeing. Now the big question, and this is where a lot of people are stressing out, is, okay, after this big splash stops and we turn into the new normal, how is that going to look like? So there's a couple of wins I personally see that are going to and they're going to stay with us. One is online payments. So because a lot of the stuff is being put online, forcefully being put online, any kind of online processor of payments is going to do pretty well, even though they're going to see a difference in the usage. But it's going to stick. A lot of the stuff is going to stick. Neobanks, I don't know if you're seeing that in Greece, but at least obviously in Europe as a large, fintech is one of the largest growing industry with the largest amount of investment. And in particular, for example, in Spain, we're seeing a lot of neobanks popping in. Probably a lot of banks are going to be in trouble. So the neobanks have actually a space to fill there in terms of having no physical footprint. It's probably a lot of them are going to stick around. Online education, I think this is pretty obvious, and I'll comment a little bit on that in a second. I'm not going to dig deeper there. Food delivery, obviously, it was already, as I was saying before, it was a trend that was already happening. Now it just went berserk. Cybersecurity, obviously, because a lot of these companies are putting their process into digital. What we're going to probably see in the next few months is a lot of hacking going on. It's already happening. It already happened in Zoom. With the rise of the use of Zoom, it's already happening. But now infiltrating a meeting is one thing. Infiltrating the manufacturing process of, I don't know, naval industry, it's a very different thing, right? So we're going to see a lot of those hackings going on because a lot of people are going to digitalize their process in a really shitty way. So, and quickly, because they need it now. So they're going to do patch over patch over patch, which is going to open the window for a lot of hacking happening. And lastly, the application of AI in everywhere, manufacturing and automation of different processes, but specifically like the use of AI on drug discovery, which was already gaining steam. It's going to skyrocket now because suddenly health is going to become pretty important, and because there's going to be a recurrence of this stuff. Everything related to vaccine discovery, antivirals, antibacteria resistant drugs and stuff like that is going to employ technology like mad. So anyway, that's a bit of what's happening. There's a lot of other sectors and a lot of other things that are happening. Maybe go back to the online part that I was saying before. While we're right now, we're using, one of the things I was investigating is what's the effect, the psychological effect for our clients as a startup with this stuff, right? Right now, a lot of people have still money, they have savings, which means that they're trying to fulfill some of the things they normally had, like online clothes, or even getting food delivery. But I'm not talking about online groceries, but the usual meal that you get, food delivery. But as the months go by and the economy deteriorates, what's going to start being threatened is our own safety as a person, as the individual, right? So what's going to start happening is we might start seeing that we don't have enough money to send our kids to school or to that school that we wanted, or we're going to start seeing the impact of, hey, I don't know if I'm going to stick in my job or they're going to rehire me, and so I'm not going to be able to pay the rent. And that's going to degrade all the way to the basic needs of getting food. People are going to start making choices. Now, there's an implication on that psychological impact, which is that the moment you get into that game, nothing else exists. You live, and as a consumer, your focus is on protecting what you have, in maintaining your safety, which means that anything that derives, any product that goes into, for example, creativity and self growth and stuff like that is really going to be fucked. So I'm not saying that everyone's going to be in that space, but it's important that as startups, we understand that we need to start refocusing our products and our services towards saying, hey, this is going to provide you for safety. It's the only way we're going to get people to chip money into our products. Now, there's other consequences here, which is people, when this happens, when there's a state of emergency, people tend to draw into things or use things that are more familiar, which means that the more you go into something different, the worse it's going to go. So you need to start thinking about what kind of metaphors you can draw into the message of your startup that draws into something that we're used to see, especially when we're doing the jump from physical to online, right? As we're going remote work, like, hey, you used to do this. Well, now I'm going to give you something that you were familiar with, but that you couldn't do before. And I'm stressing this because this is what's probably going to happen in terms of online video conferencing and online education. The tools that we have right now are pretty shitty, if you ask me, in the sense that they're good for a one-to-one, but I'm an international speaker, and honestly, there's nothing like seeing your audience and being able to connect one-on-one with all the people in the audience. That's something that right now is quite hard to do as a speaker. So right now, for example, I'm seeing Stavros and Maria on my screen, but then I'm seeing a bunch of heads up there, but I'm not seeing everyone, right? Being able to see like the full mosaic and seeing the screen moving between each person, and I see some people nodding their heads, and that for me it's extremely valuable feedback. And I think that for anyone that has done this kind of interaction, it's important, right? The same goes for an online education. We still don't have tools that allow you to that kind of degree of interaction that we normally have on a physical class. So any kind of company that provides that kind of things, that kind of tweaks to the tools that we already have, that bring back that familiar feeling that we used to have, are probably gonna have a win, right? The same also goes for it's happening with the feeling of isolation. So for those of us that have families and wives or husbands, we're all stacked. We don't need any more connections. We have all the thing. We actually need fucking isolation, more isolation if it's possible. Now, for people that are single or that they don't get along with their partners, this is increasingly a problem. And it's gonna, as the months go forward, this is gonna become increasingly an issue. I was looking into what's going on with things like porn, the porn industry, and what's happening also in the matchmaking industry. And what you're seeing two different effects. So the matchmaking industry, what's happening is people are having video dates, and they're starting to realize that while there wasn't an uptake before about these things, now people are using it a lot. They're spending more time talking, and they're lacking the basic tools within that video conferencing to do this kind of like, dating things. So there were some creative aspects where people were shipping a bottle of wine to their potential partner so they could drink the wine at the same time, same wine at the same time. So this is just one example, but I think this kind of behaviors are gonna increase. So as we rely more on the video call, we're going to start seeing verticalization of these video calls, of this video conferencing software. So Zoom right now is like the big bag for everyone, but probably we're going to see everyone starting to launch their own video thing. And this translates to obviously more data and more connectedness, which means larger deploy of 5G and kind of telecommunication networks, larger deploy of cloud computing resources, which have actually gone through the roof. So if you are working on any kind of cloud tool, by all means, keep doing it because it's going to grow massively. Let me see what other stuff I have here. Well, there's also like all the kind of models that have to do with risk assessment are going to be much needed right now because you don't have the physical interaction. That means that anything that requires some kind of risk, we're going to need to up our game. This was already happening in the banks where you could open now an account and they were doing the know your customer remotely or trying to do it remotely. But now this is going to happen for everything, right? Because every business is going to go there. So we need ways of making sure we can predict the risk. So anyone working with insurance companies, for example, anyone working with banking and doing this kind of risk assessment models, for example, for loans, there's going to be a lot of loans. And there's going to be a lot of defaults. So all those companies, one of the things I was talking with someone in a bank and they were telling me that they were working more than ever, as you guys were saying before. I think now we have what I call the drowning effect. So people are drowning and they're doing this with hands. So they're generating this shit tons of stupid work that we shouldn't be doing, but that they keep connected. You go like, I didn't work 10 hours a day before. What's going on, right? And it's this drowning thing that people are doing like this all the time and sending you emails and, hey, let's have a video call. And then that video call becomes a lot of other things, right? So this person in the bank was telling me that they were struggling to hand out loans to their customers. This traditional bank. And I was like, well, this is interesting because this gives a very good opportunity for startups in the fintech space that are automating that kind of risk assessment for loans and things like that. A lot of the startups in that space, honestly, they're going to go bust because their risk modeling was based on when everything goes fine. So now we're really going to see how robust those models really were. And what's going to happen is those companies where the models actually really correlate to reality. Hey, hello there. Those models that really correlate with reality are going to be big winners. So they might become acquisitions for the financial industry, which is going to keep working. And yeah, so basically, I'll finish with some suggestions for startups. So the first one is from a financial point of view. If you had a pending round, try to lock it as fast as possible. Try to execute any debts that you have. So any pending payments, try to get them paid now before things deteriorate further. Obviously, reduce non-essential costs. That is pretty obvious right now. So this is not winter is coming. Winter is here, and it's going to stay for a long time. Then take into account governments are not your friends. They're not going to help you. Okay, we're seeing this in Spain. I'm part of the Spanish Startup Association and National Association, and we're having this huge fight with the government. They're not going to help. I mean, all these fucking loans that are putting out there, they're not going to reach you. So you need to plan for the fact that that stuff is not going to reach you. Hey, if you manage to get one, by all means, you can put a gold star on your book, but that's not going to be the norm for most startups. So do not count on that money. Try and get debt if you can. A lot of the debt and the loans that companies, that banks, that institutions are giving, they're going to eventually be nearly free money. So if you can start loading yourself with that and up your runway, that's an important thing to do right now. Because but only do this if you have two things going on for you. First of all, is you had operational margin before the pandemic happened, because right now your margin is going to shrink, but you know that your system works. You know you're still going to have clients, right? So take on the debt because you're going to need it. And what you're going to use that debt for is to increase your automation capacity. So that way, when you keep moving forward, we start getting out of this, you're already prepared for that stuff and you still have money in the bank. I'll just give you, and also make sure that your business is going to keep on going after the crisis. So you're not on one of those really affected industries that are going to go away. So if those two conditions happen, you should start thinking about taking debt, or even what's called now venture debt. A lot of the VCs are turning their investment into debt. So that's going to be an interesting way of moving forward. And I think I'll just give you an example. I'm an investor at a company in Spain that's called libros.com, which is books, the Spanish word for books.com. And what we do is we do crowdfunding for books. And our business, we've seen our margins shrink to the minimum. So we can barely cover the costs right now. But we just got a massive loan, nearly free money. And what we're seeing is all the traditional publishing houses are being destroyed, like literally imploding. So what we're doing right now is picking up the crumbles and telling the bookstores, because the distribution system literally implode right now. So there's no way to put books in the traditional way in a bookstore. So what we're doing right now is we're reaching to indie bookstores and we're saying, hey guys, we already have this. And we have the automation to allow you to reach more people. So do you want to join forces with us? And to do that, we need to make sure we have the money to increase our automation in that part. So we're ready when this stuff goes out. So that's why we're taking on debt, and it's going really well. I mean, it's literally, the conditions are, we were thinking about it like 3 months ago, and right now it was just like, okay, let's take it now, because we will never going to get better conditions than we have now. So just take it into account on the financial planning of the startup. Routines, precisely because in a state of emergency, people tend to go to something that's familiar. Try to build out those routines in terms of your teams. If you can start having a routine, not normally the teams have a routine, but try to up it up now. So if you had like a meeting once a week, try to make it 2-3 times a week. It's important that we create this routine so people, this is taking a massive impact on everyone. Everyone is more anxious. Everyone is seeing like death everywhere. Everyone is frustrated with the fact that we don't know what's going to happen. So it's important that we kind of increase our bonding capacity with our team and with our customers. Then data modeling, make sure you're tapping onto what's going to happen in your industry nearly on a daily basis. One of the lessons that we're learning from companies in China is that they were predicting the ramping up of their manufacturing capacity or the stocking ahead of the curve. So they knew when to stop producing, and they knew when they had to start producing again and where exactly. And this is interesting because they're gaining a competitive advantage against other people. In a certain way is what I was talking about of the crowdfunding for books thing. We are right now predicting that it's going to increase more than we can increase our team, which means that we need to get prepare our systems to be able to deal with that with the same team, right? So being able to predict when exactly this starts happening or this might start happening requires to have daily or weekly data. So make sure right now that some teams have free time, make sure you start deploying data or start creating sensors up here and there and automating that sensoring capacity so you know what's going on in your industry. Then for some people, for some startups, it's important to do some kind of product adaptation. So be smart right now. If people need kind of health related qualities of your product, then push on that side. So be flexible about changing some of the stuff that you have. Just to give you examples, some of restaurants right now that are closing down, they're lending their employees to food delivery companies or to even supermarkets that are doing online groceries. I was just reading that Marriott in China just open like a buffet menu, monthly buffet menu for people. So they say for $80 a month, you can go and have all you can eat on the buffet breakfast of every hotel, Marriott hotel in China, which is another way of keeping people employed while competing with restaurants and stuff like that. So it's very smart. It's kind of reusing your team and deploying it in something else for the time being. Then if you can offer your product to public administrations, it might be a good idea. We know that there are slow payers, but if you're doing something, for example, in education and things like that, if you can, go to your city hall and say, hey, let's do a joint venture. You don't have to pay me what you normally would need to pay as a commercial client, but you still have to pay a little bit. And that way, that's money that's always going to be there. The capitalist system has this wonderful capacity of creating money out of nowhere until everything goes to shit. So while the party lasts, make sure we get the money from the government, right? If you can get it. Then start refocusing. If you were a kind of international company, start thinking that if your product is online and you can do your service anywhere in the world, keep doing it. But for most companies, it's going to be kind of inward looking movement. So you're going to start thinking about domestic market and how to do this. I was recently talking with you guys know that I'm a big tea fan. So I import a lot of tea from China, from Taiwan, from Japan. And one of the things that I was talking was with some of my Chinese vendors that are run by Americans. And they were really struggling. They said, like, dude, the package system, just the good delivery system is not working. We don't even know where the tea is going. We don't know. We cannot predict how long is it taking to ship from China to the US or even to Europe. And so they were really struggling because a lot of the customers were canceling orders. So what I told the guys is like, look, you guys are based in China. And even though your product is designed to sell to foreigners, not to the traditional Chinese market or to the traditional domestic market, maybe now it's the time to start thinking about changing your strategy and start selling to Beijing, start selling to Shanghai, to young Chinese generations that are not into tea in the same way their parents were, but now change gears, right? So I think the same is going to happen to every country in Europe also, especially because of the lockdowns. So it's important that you analyze who is your potential customer in your country and how long are they going to have money, or if they're going to be affected by this stuff, right? because this is also going to derive into something else, which is the pricing strategy. What we're seeing right now in China is that companies that have been stopped for 15, 20 days, for a month, they're now putting a premium to the prices and getting a massive backslash from the consumers. So what's going to happen is you're not going to be able to push your losses into the to the customer, because they're not going to allow you to do that. So take into account that you're probably going to need to slash your prices, and that's going to hit your bottom line and your margins. So make sure that whoever you're selling to, especially in a domestic market, you've traced down who has the money right now in the country, or who is more probable to have the money in the long term right now. So I did a quick analysis of the Greek economy, and for example, while agriculture is pretty small right now, take into account that's going to grow. So if you're into agrotech or things like that, now is the moment to start putting technology in the agriculture, because all the supply chains are going to shrink. Everyone's going to bring the supply chains back home, which means that Greek actually exports a lot of food to Europe. So it's going to that's going to increase. So if you're in that space, that's going to eventually make money. Manufacturing, well, that's a different story. That's like nearly 17% of the Greek industry. And it's basically food processing, metallurgy, and a lot of cement. I don't know why you guys do a lot of cement, but you do a lot of cement. So if you're in that industry, well, that might get hit, because real estate right now is getting hit drastically, right? So if you're trying to sell products to those industries, be careful with how that's going to evolve. Apparel, so you guys actually do a lot of clothing, in especially in Europe. That is right now fucked up big time. So again, my logic here is try to analyze how your country behaves structurally in terms of the industries that are out there, and project how long is it going to take for them to recover, because that's going to give you who do you need to pursue domestically as your customer. And then lastly, start rethinking the message of your startup. So if you're raising funds, be smart about it. Start looking at what kind of companies VCs are investing in right now. They're looking, and I know this for a fact because until very recently, I was working with an M&A boutique. So I was the one signaling what kind of industries should we be investing or should we be buying. And I can tell you, biotech, anything AI related, agrotech, so kind of deep tech kind of stuff in biomedicine, in telemedicine, in automation of work, video conferencing, e-commerce, obviously, but smart e-commerce, all that stuff is going to be the favorite for a lot of VCs. So if you're touching some of those things, be smart, change your pitch, start pitching that stuff. Start pitching the fact that your company, instead of producing software for people to work with, hey, you're part of the solution. You're part of the recovery, because your technology is going to accelerate digital transformation, or your technology is going to accelerate the automation of this industry or that industry. Now, also, where is it? Try and focus on kind of metaphors that people are familiar. As I was saying before, people are now looking for stuff that is familiar to them, and start focusing on safety messages. Hey, with our technology, you can keep your job, or with our technology, you can make more money, or with our technology, you can reduce the cost so your margins are higher. Whatever it is that brings security and a sense of, hey, we are okay with this, guys, because they're going to make sure that our company stays afloat. So all those messages now are important for you to start changing as a company, and to start redefining what is your pitch, because the world is going to look very differently now. So anyway, with this, I'm done. And hey, bring in the questions.
Alex, thank you so much. That was fantastic. Awesome presentation. And thank you for putting in all that effort and that great preparation like you always do, some very salient points. I take away some interesting kind of facts around how much more virtual interactivity, the online dating. There was an interesting article the other day about Zoom and how Zoom is using AI to detect nudity, because people are using Zoom to do kind of virtual virtual swinger parties, this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of interesting things going on, and people, within this confinement, if you like, are getting inventive and figuring out new ways to express themselves and cope, if you like. I also take messages from what you're saying, that we're much lower down Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and those are the things that we need to look at. So more survival, more real needs, rather than the higher order stuff, the more comfort stuff. And so I take what you're saying there.
It's interesting because that evolution is going to be gradual. So right now, a lot of people are not seeing it. They're like, I still have money, I still have a job, but things are going to get shitty really fast. So if you start planning for the safety part now, then you'll be ready when the shit hits the fan.
I see that both as a start, how startups should react, but every citizen, in fact, because that effectively that's what the consumer is going to be behaving like, right? So the startup needs to be understanding what the consumer will be doing in 3 months, 6 months, however long this might take. And it might be a short-term thing, but it might be a very long-term thing. So whatever it is, the new reality, we do need to be agile, as you very correctly said in the beginning. Let's go to some questions or some comments from anybody in the room. If you guys want to jump in, just unmute your microphone.
Guys and ladies.
And ladies,
we also
of course,
have ladies with
I
us.
suppose. When I say guys, I mean that too.
Also, you touched a topic on education. I mean, we see this also with the boys. I mean, one of them, Panayoti, the school has got very well organized and prepared, and they're doing Zoom schooling.
It's very interesting how the one school has actually evolved very quickly, whereas another school hasn't.
Yeah, and they're trying to keep them on track, and they have schooling every day between 8 and 2, and they have this, which is what you mentioned, that's very important. We need this, and for the kids even more. They're not as disciplined as we are, that like our youngest one, he's supposed to just go into a platform, a local Greek platform, get his homework from there, do it and give it in. It's definitely not the same. And
there isn't the demand from the other side, where the teacher is actually adjudicating and watching. But as you mentioned, I mean, a lot of the interactivity that they would have in a classroom, if they were being noisy or if they didn't pay attention, because right now, I mean, we have caught Panos. And Panos, we're talking about you in the other room there. We have caught him on the one screen, doing something else, doing something around kind of some game or something like that, or on Discord, talking to his friends in Discord on the one screen, and then on the other screen he's got the teacher. And now the teachers have started demanding that the microphone is not muted and the video is always on. So it's interesting how that has evolved, and the teachers themselves have evolved.
There's a point there to be said, because there's been what they're predicting is an evolution of a lot of the stuff. Even if it's online, there's a big component that's still asynchronous, right? You get it online, you do it, and then you give it back. But the shift, it's like towards real time. Everything is going towards real time to try and mimic the familiarity of what we normally do face to face. So I think everything is going to go to open mic, constant video. So there's this whole real time, for the good and the bad, obviously.
Yeah. Let's take some questions, guys. Go ahead, guys and girls. Go ahead and unmute your microphone and
feel free to
join the conversation, please. This is I'll open it up for everyone, and that way we can. There we go. We can ask you. Go ahead.
Marina.
Maria, go ahead.
I'm so glad to be part of this very interesting conversation and have you here, Alex. So thank you for being here with us.
My pleasure.
So my question is this: every startup or emerging company can observe the market and see how it can adjust to it with, of course, data-driven decisions, etc. But my question is about culture and how a startup company can grow a sustainable culture with a strong sense of belonging when you're not there. You don't belong. You're still trapped in your home.
That's a good question. Well, honestly, the trend had already been going towards that. There's an increasing amount of startups that have dislocated work, and what they do is they get together once every X. Right. Well, I think it's more of a, how do I put it? It's more of a psychological effect than the actual physical aspect itself. I still appreciate massively when I go to a conference and I meet with people.
Right.
But honestly, when I think about myself maybe 10 years ago and now I feel a lot more comfortable. I feel the same feeling now with certain online tools that I used to have before one-on-one. So I think it's more of a psychological adaptation that we're going to see. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I've gotten this many times. And actually, Spiros was asking, and I'll answer you in a second, about social media. But I have a lot of followers on Twitter and people that I've never met. And sometimes they eventually meet you and they say like, dude, it feels like I've known you all my life. And it's only been based on what you've shared either on Twitter or on Instagram. So we're getting to the point where we're so used to that, and the human adaptation is so fast that we will get used to most of it. I don't think it's gonna hurt. I think it's more on a personal level. Maybe it has also to do with the generations. So Stavros has he's still gonna need to go out and berate people and scream at people. He's just gonna have to do that no matter what. But for the younger generations, I think they're more used to being connected and doing a lot of stuff that we used to do physically. So the younger the team, I think the easier this is gonna become.
Right. So that tells me that a company should have a more psychological approach towards the individual, and actually shows that I care for your needs, your unique needs, and help them with whatever they need. More time, a little bit of a bonus, or something, I don't know, something extra. Right.
Well, I think this is going to have an impact in the sense that for those that have worked with remote work, they know this for a fact, especially if you've been doing it for a long time, is remote work is not, as most people say, it's not cheaper. People say, oh, this is cheaper, but it's not really cheaper, because the amount of investment you have to do in connecting is much higher, right? So the thing is, a lot of companies need to now figure out how to change their connection procedures to keep this kind of culture going. And that means that you need to see people more often. You need to connect with people more often than you did before. And eventually this will stabilize with the right amount. Right now we're figuring out what is the right amount. And honestly, I think there's too many Zooms and too many people doing online live feeds on Instagram. I just run a poll 2 days ago, and like 70-something% people say like, I'm fucking fed up with people putting live feeds on Instagram. So the thing is, right now there's this, like, the pendulum keeps going back and forth, right? Everyone now is exploring all this stuff. Eventually we will settle down into something more humane, if you get what I mean.
All right, thank you.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Any other? Let's take one or two more. Alex, I'm conscious that this new culture is emerging, and you're right. At some point, it's going to stabilize it somewhere. But it's a good time to be a part of this, because perhaps we can be a part of how this culture will emerge and how it will be formed.
Yeah, I think those of us that have been doing this for a while, this is kind of, I wouldn't say it's normal, because it's not, but it's kind of easier for us to deal with this stuff because we already have our tools and all those things. But I'll tell you this, with the guys at Libros, one of the things I was telling the CEO recently is like, look, you need to do more meetings with the team, because the levels of anxiety, even if they still have a job and they're still going to have a job, the levels of anxiety and the uncertainty is so big that your performance drops. And you need to have your CEO coming to you and saying, it's okay, I'm screwing my performance too, right? Yeah. And I think every single one of us is feeling this. And I told the CEO, it's like, look, you need to do more meetups, remote meetups, just to have beers, just to calm people, just to say, it's okay, we're human and we are all hurting, and this is going to go on for a while. And just, just to take I think people are like overreacting. It's like, oh, we need to do this stuff, and because no one is looking at me, I need to show them that I'm working. those of us that have worked on this before, we know that's not the case. But now you have the added stuff that there's a lot of stress going on. You have the kids. If you have kids, you have the kids at home. You are with your partner all the time, clashing in certain aspects, right? And you're thinking about, am I going to be able to have a business in a month or 2 months, right? And what is the government doing? And all that stuff, it's affecting us. I'm having a little bit of more of insomnia. I'm having a harder time reading. I'm having a harder time focusing on stuff. Even things like being creative, I'm having a harder time, like just taking some time and doing my calligraphy, or even enjoying things like my tea. That before I would just use it as a way to calm myself. Now I'm finding it harder to do those things. So I think we just need to be a little bit more human about this and understand the impact that this is taking on us.
You also talked a lot about startup and how this whole crisis is affecting them. But I would say, I mean, globally, we're seeing a lot of hackathons around the crisis that we're all going through. It'd be interesting to see the outcome, the ideas, and what talent and what kind of ideas might grow out of some of these hackathons. I mean, from our own experience, we know that the hackathons don't really build business out of it. There are very few who do.
Not immediately, anyway.
Yeah. But it'd be cool to see what kind of ideas. I mean, let's not forget that most of them might be kind of inexperienced or new to it, but it'd be cool to see what kind of ideas and opportunity might arise from such hackathons.
Alexander, you have a question. Go ahead.
Yes, I mean, as I said, as I wrote, wow, it was very impressive amount of information. And then I mean, you've built, you show the whole, let's say, landscape, a changing landscape out there, which I think is what we'll witness gradually. And you noted one point, I mean, several points, but one point that stuck to me is that a lot of things will happen slowly. I mean, we see now, of course, there's this big bang where or implosion actually, where we isolate, but things will also change gradually because you know, money will be less in the market, or at least some markets, and things will and the markets will adapt. So I have two questions. What you see in two areas which are completely different from each other. One is, I would say, rather how do you call it? You know, completely financial, is the aspects of real estate. I mean, would you expect real estate value, let's say, to fall when you cannot anymore visit it, or on the contrary, people might disperse in greater areas, just to, you know, maintaining a distance. Perhaps prices will fall, and then they have the opportunity to isolate in a completely different manner. And the other is in terms of solidarity. I mean, as Maria noted, there are not at the moment a lot of hackathons. There's a lot of offer from people in all walks of life. But as things are going to get harder in the economy, it's easy to start to looking for enemies. In this case, I read an article which was interesting, that the second wave of people without work will have a lot more trouble, because in the beginning, you know, they feel a sympathy. People have sympathy for them. Then they might become people begging, or people who are a threat to whoever has something.
So very good questions, both. I'm going to connect part of what you said with what Maria was saying with the hackathon aspect. One of the things I'm seeing, and I'm seeing it from inside the government because I have a lot of contacts there, and outside, is that the major issue right now is to connect industry, government, and hackathons. There are, at least in most countries, there are no mechanisms to absorb that kind of innovation. And that's why it's going to take time. Here in Spain, we saw a lot of very good stuff, but the people in the government were telling me, we don't have anything on how to absorb that into the government and make use of it. Even if it's useful and we see the usefulness, we just are not prepared to incorporate that. So that's part of the changes in the regulations and structure of the administration and how that's going to change. And that's going to take time, as you were saying. So we're probably going to see a lot of hackathons kind of bounce back because they don't stick around, because there are no mechanisms right now for the government or for the industry to absorb that as it is. That's going to change, and hopefully that's going to become the usual operation for or the connection between private and public, or innovative and non-innovative. Now, to your question, real estate. So I can tell you, in China, it's picking up very fast. So it's been like a V kind of recuperation or recovery. So it was dropping, and then now it's picking up again. Now, take into account, China is not the perfect mirror for many reasons, but the most important one is because it hasn't been shut down at all. I mean, they shut down a part of the country, definitely one affecting manufacturing, but the rest of the country was semi-open, which means that they are not having the same impact that we're seeing in Europe or that we're seeing in the US, right? So in terms of real estate, what everyone is saying and what I personally feel that's very plausible is kind of big offices. So anything kind of big offices for companies are probably going to degrade. So as people get more used to the remote work, they're gonna prefer that kind of working than actually everyone going to a building. I'm not saying that's not gonna stay. That's obviously gonna stay for certain industries, but in most cases, you're gonna start seeing like a hybrid, which means that you are gonna be able to switch to another building that's smaller, so you pay less rent. Keep in mind that right now, cost efficiency is one of the major drivers for the recovery. So a lot of companies are going to go there. So they're probably going to rent smaller places. That's one. So basically any kind of, so residential, it's more or less going to stay the same. People are obviously going to delay the buying of residential space. So if they can delay it as much as possible, they will. That will eventually pick up. What it's not that clear is that commercial real estate is going to pick up as fast as residential, because a lot of the restaurants and like businesses that require foot traffic are going to be disrupted, either because they run out of money before the economy picks up again, or because the behaviors start changing. So think about pharmacies or drugstores, right? If you get used to getting your pharmacy things or your drugs online, it's going to be hard for you to eventually go back as frequently as you did to go to a physical pharmacy. So all the commercial real estate is probably going to take a massive hit, and it's going to take way longer to recover than the residential aspect. And in terms of solidarity, you're very right. Keep in mind what I was talking about, the pyramid of Maslow and the needs. As much as you can criticize Maslow, and the interpretation is that in an emergency state, as you reduce your capacity, you start focusing on yourself and your own needs, which means that this initial wave of solidarity that we're seeing right now, which is, by the way, very typical from Southern European countries, more than as we can clearly see from Northern countries, but it's not going to last. The moment that you start lacking the money to feed your kids, you're going to stick to your own thing. And I'm telling you, I'm very I try and help as much as possible. And I know this, for example, tea vendors that I was saying before, I've been trying to help them in as many ways as I can, except buying tea, because I don't want to invest right now a money that I don't know if I'm going to need to feed my kids in 3 months. So
thank you, Alex. Elena, you have a quick question. Go ahead before we wrap up.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Cube Athens, for today, and Alex, for your valuable information. I just want to ask a quick question regarding your opinion, Alex, on being a speaker yourself and your knowledge on the events for self-development, live events. Do you think after the year and a half that has passed, that this is something will be phased out, that it'll become online? Or do you think someone that would like to invest or start up something like here, event planning here, is still something that can happen but will delay?
So I think conferences are not going to go away by any stretch of the word. It's just going to take way longer to get them back on. First, because of the traveling issues. Second, because people are not going to have the money to attend the conference. And third, because the sponsors are not going to be willing to put that money to sponsor that conference, right? So the triple combination makes it a long-term recovery for most conferences. However, I do believe that most of the ones that were delivering value, or even the new ones that are now being thought about to deliver new value in things, imagine like reskilling of people into the new digital technologies, right? Well, those reskilling conferences, for example, it's something that maybe we didn't need that much before, but now are becoming critical. Or online education conferences that weren't like a thought before, but now they're, so that is going to come. It's just going to take time, honestly, and don't expect large scale uptake of that until a year and a half or more.
Thank you,
Elena. Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much. What a fantastic meetup this was. Thank you, Maria, for putting it together, and thank you, Tasso. Thank you, Istem, Maria, Nikos, Olga, Alexander, for your great question, George, everybody, Spiros. This has been fantastic. Alex, we expect you in Greece as soon as you can travel. As soon as you can travel, and you have promised to bring the family, so that we can, we can do something together as families. And you have a young family, and I'm always glad we're always glad to connect with you again. And you were here last summer. We had a brief lunch together. It was great to meet your wife. And be safe. Our love to our Spanish friends and cousins, and everybody. Thank you again for being with us for yet another guest at home, and we'll look to put on more of this on a daily basis as we have. It's so fantastic to connect with you all the time. Alex, you're amazing.
Well, guys, thank you very much for the invitation. As you always know, I feel at home with you guys. I always feel at home in Greece. My wife is completely in love with Greece and with you guys also. She's like, we have to go back. And I'm like, I know, we will go back. And now that you guys are getting into rugby, I can drop the twins on you. I'm pretty sure they'll love smacking some people around. So that is definitely going to work. And everyone, thank you so much for joining in. It was my absolute pleasure sharing this hour with you guys. And you know where I am. So any other question, you can shoot me an email. Oh, I'll just put my email here just for the record for anyone that wants to.
Fantastic.
Awesome. If anyone wants to connect and hasn't managed here, you can
just
ping
reach
us
out on the Facebook group, and we can connect you with Alex. Thank you very much,
guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. We look forward to seeing everybody again tomorrow night. Tomorrow we have Nick Tsioulis. He's Greek American. He's going to talk about the diaspora. He's considering coming back to Greece and investing time
Greece is a great place.
And money in Greece and in the startup. So it's going to be a very cool topic. And of course, we have a startup weekend going on throughout the weekend. We're going to jump in a call for that now. So stay tuned. And again, thank you everybody for joining. Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.
See you guys. Bye-bye. Ciao, ciao.